Welcome to the MS&Me Radio Network, a division of the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network. The following program broadcast is an original creation by the broadcast entity. Discussion within the following broadcast should be used for informational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice or consultation. Before considering application of any broadcast content in the following program, please consult your healthcare provider. If you feel you are having a medical emergency, please contact your local health services for immediate assistance. MS&Me Media and the Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network do not guarantee or warrant the accuracy of information in the broadcast to follow. The Multiple Sclerosis Global Support Network provisions broadcast services to program hosts. Information discussed in the broadcast does not necessarily reflect the views, opinions, or goals of the network and are solely those of the show broadcast host. Should you wish to host a broadcast, please visit our website at msmemedia.com and submit a request to become a program host. We thank you for listening to the MS&Me Radio Network. Enjoy the show.
Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Positively Different MS show, all the way from Scotland here in the United Kingdom. This week's show is called The Turning Point Counselling, which will offer you news and information and a different perspective on life with MS and maybe how counselling could help you in your journey just like it significantly helped me in my journey. My name is Patricia Gackigan. I am an author, mum, radio host and person of positivity. My debut book, Born Together, was released in May this year and shares all of my journey and all the many positive tools I found to manage MS to the best of my ability. This show focuses every week on my MS jigsaw, which I created over the last 11 years, putting together everything that has helped me on my way. There is no bigger piece than that of counselling, which I want to look at this week, and the importance it has played in my life and most certainly in my MS journey. I had MS for around 7 years before I went to talk to a counsellor. Over those 7 years, I had simply pushed forward, day in and day out. I hadn't probably even looked up to see how I was managing and definitely not to find out how I was feeling and coping emotionally. All those thoughts and feelings were tightly under lock and key. No one was welcome to talk and ask what it was like going from a very fit, sporty, adventurous and travelling school teacher to a new mum with a tiny baby and a chronic disease whose body just would not do the things that I asked it to do. And I mean no one was allowed to ask, not even me. We just continued on, day by day, to talk about surface issues, family issues, and just get by with what had to be done every day to manage life. No one was allowed to dig any deeper, and that went on for a long time, many, many years. That was until one day after we had arrived home from an extended family holiday, where I had tried to keep up with everyone else, tried to keep up appearances, tried to fit in with all the normal family activities, and it just hadn't worked out that way. I came home stressed and exhausted, and my husband candidly said to me, "Tricia, you need to go and talk to someone. If you can't share this with us, then you need to think about possibly talking to a counsellor, to your doctor, just someone else." That came as a real bolt out the blue for me. I thought I was doing okay. I thought I was managing nicely, getting by. But I took it on the chin and retreated quietly to think about it. I'm not someone who normally retreats, and certainly never quietly. But I did on this occasion, and I was angry, most at myself. I was frustrated. I was uptight far too much of the time, and apart from the joy with Elliot, I didn't even consider even remotely the concept of being happy with myself again. It was just merely a case of pushing through and managing MS and making sure Elliot had all his needs met and he was growing up nice, safely and well nurtured, and that the basic family needs were met too. I hadn't admitted to myself that my MS was putting a strain on your small family. And I was so hard on myself, always forcing my body to be able to do things and fit in, even when my body didn't want to. I just didn't know the word for no at that point in my life, and I wasn't very kind to myself at all. My husband was very supportive, and it didn't put a strain on our relationship as husband and wife. We just kept on pushing through together. We are a formidable team and we are very strong together. But we didn't talk and understand each other and understand our feelings. We didn't give any time to that. It was purely a case of management. And when he spoke to me and suggested maybe I should talk to someone, it made me think and made me realise that maybe there should be more to life than just managing, just because I had been given an MS diagnosis. I spoke to my GP, Dr. Lindsay. She was, as always, super understanding and supportive, and referred me to the National Health Service Counselling Service here in Scotland in the United Kingdom. It took some weeks and an initial telephone assessment before I was partnered with my counsellor, Alan McNeil, and my life-changing counselling sessions on a weekly basis began. I plan to devote next week's show to counselling too, as it was such a pivotal piece of my jigsaw that has allowed the rest of the MS jigsaw to happen and to fit together. Possibly without counselling, I would still be stuck at the place I was in. A place where there was absolute refusal to talk about what having MS meant to me and to my family, as well as forcing myself physically to do things that caused me stress and discomfort. That place where life was just about managing and making sure Elliot's needs were met. It was not about individuals, people, me, my husband, my family, how we felt and how we could possibly reach a higher and better place in our lives together. Life is a journey and acceptance is a process. That was all part of my process. And the reason I want to devote next week's show to counselling too is to stress its importance, and hopefully listeners out there may think this is something that could help and assist me in my journey through MS or through life itself. Counselling was tough, very tough, and it made me question the very essence of who I am, or at least who I thought I was. I had always been a determined person, someone who copes, the organiser, and someone who refuses to accept defeat. I have always pushed forward to find another answer or another way, no matter what I have been confronted with. I was treating MS just the same way I had treated everything else in my life. You can't get in and you can't beat me. What I had not considered in any way whatsoever was that there is more than one way to reach the same outcome. There are different methods to achieve the same thing. It was time to start changing my perspective and my approach to MS. Not to stop thinking that it wouldn't beat me, because that's a good place to be, that's a good way to be, but just to think differently about how I was going to manage that and not be so harsh on myself and others around me. And so, counselling began and opened up this whole new perspective for me. There are so many things I remember clearly from those counselling sessions that I still use in my everyday life. One of the first analogies that the counsellor Alan used was to talk about me as a bus driver and not to try to stop my problems and challenges from getting on the bus, not to try and push them away and leave them outside, which can sometimes be your instinct and desire to do so. But instead he suggested to invite them all on board, because after all I have to live with them all and deal with them. But the counsellor's point was to remember that I was the driver of that bus and I was in charge. It was ultimately up to me to decide in which direction I should go and how I would deal with everything that was on board the bus. That meant deciding what is the most appropriate and beneficial way to approach problems and challenges. I use that analogy all the time and in reference to all the things that come and go in my life. It is an analogy we can all use to help us focus and manage with or without MS. Counselling started my new journey towards acceptance that there are different ways to do the same thing. Up until then, I had forced myself and my body to do things no matter how it made me feel. My new journey would find new ways to do old things, ways that would mean I was actually kinder to myself. The simplest example I can give you would be that after years of slogging out on the stairs to attend school and parents' meetings, just so that I fitted in walking up and down the stairs with all the other mums and dads, I simply stopped, and one day I said, I'll just take the lift. I was differently abled, and so my journey to doing things differently had begun. What the others didn't understand was that I still could take the stairs if I kept pushing myself. After all, I live in a house with stairs. But my journey towards acceptance that I had to live differently had begun, and that meant being kinder to myself and taking small baby steps in the right direction to do things differently. In all the meetings that followed, only on one occasion did another mum, whose name was Kelly, take the lift with me and continue a conversation. Every other time, I took the lift on my own, whilst the others took the stairs all chatting away. It was the first step in my journey to realising too that others will treat me differently once I start to put myself out there and make different choices. These choices are about being kinder to me, but it means I will stand out and others did start to treat me differently. I've always been different throughout my life, and so I started to see this as an opportunity, a positive and not a negative, a chance to be myself, do things my way. That's when I started to make decisions like take up writing, learn once again how to express myself and open myself up to the truth. That's when I started writing, putting the beginning of writing Born Together. It was staring right at me, in front of me, that I was different and that my life was now different. I could keep on hurting myself and trying to fit in and refuse to accept my differences, or I could find the positives and just accept being different and even find some enjoyment in it. Next week, I will share more from my counselling sessions and experiences, but now I am very excited to tell you that I managed to catch up and get back in touch with the counsellor Alan McNeil again, and he has kindly and greatly agreed to come on the show and talk with me about his experiences and the role counselling can play in many people's lives. I was thrilled to meet up with him again and chat with him. It was a great pleasure, and now I'll go straight over to chatting with Alan. Hi Alan, can I just welcome you to the show today and thank you so much for coming along to talk to us. And can I ask you just to start off by giving us a little bit of background and how you became interested in becoming a counsellor?
Hi Tricia, thanks for asking me to do this, and it's really great to see you again. My background is pretty varied. I was born and brought up in Glasgow, and I went off to South Africa when I was about 19. And in the course of being there, I did a whole lot of different jobs and ended up actually doing musical theatre. And I did a charity show for a hospice at the time. And I was really impressed with what was happening there. And I actually started volunteering there while I was still doing musical theatre. And eventually they actually offered me a job. So I went to work there at the hospice, gave up show business,
Really?
ran away from the circus, if you like, into working in a hospice. And that really got me into working much more in supporting patients, supporting families, and really planted a seed for me that I felt that was much more naturally the kind of career that I wanted for myself. With that idea in my head that I wanted to take the idea of counselling a bit further, and eventually worked my way into getting into university in Glasgow. And I've been working with the National Health Service in Glasgow since 2002. And I also run a small private practice. So that's a bit of a potted history of how I became a counsellor.
It's a great route you've taken. It's been really different, to get you to the point where you're at. So Alan, how does a person know when it's the right time to go for counselling, or do they know? Can you know?
Well, I think it's quite different for different people. There's obviously a great variation. You mentioned in your book that, you can't compare different people who've got MS because it's quite a different journey and quite a different experience for everybody. So with counselling, it's a bit like that as well. You can have sort of different categories, I suppose, of people, but I think one of the beauties of counselling for me is that it's very tailored and unique to each individual person. There is no one size fits all. There's no prescription, there's no formula. It's really about the process of getting to know that person, forming a relationship with that person, and then trying to come up together with a way forward. So I think if somebody is in a situation where they're basically feeling not happy, when they're struggling, when there are things going on that they're not coping with, even if they have knowledge of previous issues or current issues, things like trauma or abuse or family dysfunction, bereavement, those kind of things. Some people obviously have an awareness that these things have happened, but people can also talk about things like, I'm not sure why I feel the way that I do. I've got lots of good things in my life and I should be really happy, but I'm just not feeling it. People can also struggle to be adjusting to things like health conditions, changes in circumstances, relationship breakdowns, those kind of things. So it's quite different for different people.
Do you think that counselling is something that everyone can go to? Do you think it's for everyone, or just certain people that it wouldn't suit?
Well, I think it can potentially help everyone, but it does depend quite a lot if a person has preconceived ideas about what counselling is. You will always find people that think it's a lot of rubbish and that it's a waste of time and it's indulgent, and probably for those people it's not really going to do very much. But I think if someone is open, if someone is curious, and if they're able to reflect, and also they have that click, it's very important also that you can feel comfortable with the person that you're talking to, and also finding the right kind of approach.
For me, I think that the click was really important, but at the time I didn't think I needed counselling. I really didn't, so it's something I would suggest, if you're not sure about, to be open to, and consider it as something that could help you.
I think a chat with a counsellor it has nothing to lose. If you're not sure, you don't think it's for you, having a chat is going to confirm one way or the other.
I think that's a good piece of advice, just to start it off rather than to close the door on it. Alan, could you tell us if there are different types of counselling, and how a person would know what was the right counselling for them to go to?
Well, there's a whole lot of different approaches to counselling, Tricia, as you know. CBT, cognitive behavioural therapy, has become the approach that the NHS supports and prefers, which is not for everybody in my mind. It's a slightly more programmed approach that you have a set number of sessions and there are exercises and tasks to complete within each session. It doesn't necessarily focus very much on the relationship that you have with the counsellor or with the events themselves that have happened or the detail of the adjustment that's going on at the time. So CBT is for some people.
A wee bit more clinical then?
It's a little bit more clinical, a little bit more formulaic, and with a more person-centred type of counselling. Of course, you're wanting to try to go more at the pace of the client themselves. And my training is from a person-centred background. But as you know, in the work that we did together, Tricia, I will use many different types of approach, whatever seems to be appropriate and specific to my sense of the client and also to the situation that they're in and the sense that I get of how they might utilise different models. So we might use things like mindfulness. There are different things like the Venus and Mars model that I think we also used. And there's things like transactional analysis, which is using the idea of the parent and the adult and the child and how we can all...
You used that really rings a bell.
We did use that. I think that was very useful. And I find that many people, you really can get into that model of understanding that they can feel different ways about the same thing.
Yeah.
So part of me feels like this about that, another part of me feels like that.
It's a great way just to start opening your mind up to different perspectives and how somebody else would feel, so you know how to approach the situation.
We're always trying to get more into the adult about dealing with situations, dealing with mental health issues, because we can often feel more lost in the child at times when it comes to emotional issues or family issues or health issues. Whereas when people think about how they are at work, they may feel quite confident and quite equipped to tackle and deal with things on a professional basis. Whereas when it comes to personal issues, emotional issues, family issues, it's much more the child that is present, and the child can often be much more full of anxiety and self-doubt and panic and pessimism about things. And it's very important to maybe do a little bit of research yourself and then establish with your counsellor what kind of model that they might be using.
I think it's be good for people to do that, because I think it can be off-putting if you're not sure and you don't understand it. So a bit of research yourself, and then, like you were saying before, a good chat with your counsellor to start with, to lay some foundations.
Definitely.
Do you have any advice, Alan, on how to help someone to take the first step towards counselling or towards a self-help approach if they're finding difficulties in their life?
So if you ever have a chance to speak to someone who's had counselling, then that's always useful.
I think that's a great idea.
And not just from the point of view of what's worked for them, but actually just hearing what their experience was. Because I remember somebody talking about, I asked my friend about counselling and she said, oh, it was terrible. They asked me this and they asked me that, and I just wasn't for me. And the person said, well, it wasn't for her, but I thought to myself, but that's exactly what I need.
Right.
So even finding somebody who doesn't have a good experience, it may still give you more information that helps you to focus on what might be good for you.
And I think it's a great idea you suggest there to talk to somebody that's been for counselling. And that's what I'm hoping to do through this show and through this interview, is to sort of open the door for more people to think if it's appropriate for them, if it's something that could help them in their journey. Rather than think, that's not for me, just to be a bit more open-minded. Because in my journey with MS, as I previously said, counselling has played a big role to help me towards acceptance, and I am very grateful for that, because I didn't even realise I had a problem at the time. So are there any warning signs that people should look out for that mean that we may be in need of support, or it's something that we should be aware of?
A sense of not feeling happy with something, or feeling overwhelmed by something going on in your life, whether it's something that's happening or things that have happened in the past. We can all engage in unhealthy coping mechanisms, and we all know what they are because we've all done them. We can be eating too much, drinking too much, maybe taking drugs, even shopping, gambling, these kind of things can all be comforting coping mechanisms that we can use just in the short term. People can often be shutting down too much, avoiding people or going out. In the other direction, it can make us snappy and irritable. Sleep can be disturbed. That can lead to relationship conflict and any sense of feeling overwhelmed. Also, just even like in your own case, Tricia, struggling to cope with the distress of a health condition and finding that all the mechanisms that you're using just don't seem to be getting you where you want to get to. So there can be many signs, and the people around us will often realise those signs before we do ourselves.
It's really interesting you saying that, because it was actually my husband Alan who said to me, you are doing great, you're doing amazing coping with this, but I think you would really benefit from talking to someone else. Yes, and my husband Alan was right. The counselling really did help and influence me in my journey. But at this point, I think it's really important to say that is actually the only time he's been right in the rest of our marriage. But moving on swiftly, we'll get back to Alan next week to hear more about counselling for everyone in all walks of life. It is something that I talk open and honestly about in my book, Born Together. To tell people about our difficulties and to open up is quite difficult, and maybe there's things in our past or in our present that are blocking us and stopping us from moving forward. So I think it's a really vital thing that we talk about it, to make it more acceptable to people to approach someone else for some help. There's a lot we can learn, and a lot can help us to face our futures. I look forward already to hearing more from Alan and about counselling on next week's show. And now for this week's Positip. This ties in nicely with this week's MS Jigsaw piece, counselling. It is to try to live in the moment, be aware of what's going on around you. It all starts by letting go of the past and not going over things. Focusing on the moment works well for me. I have practiced and practiced not going over things, especially negatives. I can't change them. What is done is done. What has happened has happened. But I do have some control over how I respond to living in that moment and how I deal with it in that moment. When my mind is racing or going over something negative, I stop myself by repeating the mantra, I choose my own thoughts. I choose my own thoughts. I go over and over this to myself until the negative thought dissipates and leaves me. Looking too far ahead and worrying about the future serves no purpose at all. If it is something we can influence, then do take action to do so. After that, try not to focus on it, but instead live your life for the here and now. I'm not suggesting any of this is easy. It has taken me some time to break old habits of negativity and go over things and create new habits. It takes time, it takes commitment, it takes effort, but it is very, very worthwhile because it definitely has changed how I live on a day-to-day basis now. I visualise positive things in my future and, good or bad, I immerse myself in the moment, whatever's going on. I let go of yesterday, I let go of what has happened. It's not easy and it challenges me to the core, but I know it is ultimately the only way to move forward positively. Try to see if you can incorporate living in the moment into your life and into your way of thinking. It may take you some time, but it would be a very worthwhile thing to learn and to achieve. And now Lorraine Hudson will read this week's quote from Mary Engelbreit.
If you don't like something, change it. If you can't change it, change the way you think about it.
Thank you everyone for listening, and a big thank you to my return listeners and to our special guest Alan McNeil this week. We are all on a journey together towards positive change in your life. We can all benefit from the life jigsaw, the MS jigsaw, and we can certainly all benefit from each other and all the pieces we have to offer and share to help us move from the place we are in to the place we want to be. Life is short, but we can manage it together. I'll leave you with positive thoughts always, and remember, together we really can find a way.